friends, welcome back to Faith and Arrow Homestead. My name is Jaylee and this is part 3 of a Valentine's Day dinner video series. So we've made homemade roasted beef broth, we have made freshly milled bread bowls, and now we are tying it all together and we are making a delicious bread bowl French onion soup that I'm hoping that you'll make for your loved one on Valentine's Day. That was the inspiration behind this video, but even if not, and I know I'm cutting it kind of close with releasing these videos anyway, so if it doesn't work out for that, I hope you just decide to make it anyway because it is delicious and very nutritious, a beautiful meal to feed your loved ones. So now we're going to go ahead and talk about the French onion soup part of this meal. And this is a recipe that's going to go up on my website. I've been working on it. And it's difficult for me to write recipes. That's the thing that I struggle with the most because I am very loose and open in the kitchen, and I very much follow my instincts, and I don't often stick to recipes, and so it's hard for me to operate with a recipe mindset. So there are a few things that I want to give you, a few little caveats that we're going to go over here in the beginning. I wrote this recipe to be a 4 servings recipe. That's how it's going to go up on the website, but I was very careful when I was choosing my measurements to write it in a way where it could very easily be scaled up or down. So if you are making this for just you and your spouse or your significant other, or if you're making it for your family of 6, you can scale it either way. So I want to start with the onions. I wrote this recipe to be either half an onion to a full onion per serving. And again, this is where it's difficult for me because I want to write it as 1 onion per serving, but maybe not everybody likes that many onions. I know my husband doesn't like that many onions. So you have to ask yourself, how oniony do I want this to be? So say that you have 4 servings like we're doing in this recipe. We are going to use 3 whole onions. You could use 4 whole onions. You could use 2.5 whole onions. So I want that to be left up to you, and I want you to think about what are our preferences, what would we prefer. And then for every onion, you need 1 tablespoon of butter. So we're doing 3 onions, we're gonna have 3 tablespoons of butter. Now, this recipe does call for a dry white wine. Here I have a white cooking wine. You could also use red wine. You could also just use more beef broth if you don't want to use wine, and that's totally fine. You need a tablespoon per serving. So we have 4 servings. We're going to do 4 tablespoons. 4 tablespoons equals 1/4 a cup. And then when deciding how much beef broth to use, you want 1.5 cups of beef broth per serving. We have 4 servings, that equals 6 cups of beef broth. And then things like the pepper and the thyme, those can be to your taste. I'm doing 1/2 teaspoon of salt per serving, which gives us 2 teaspoons of salt. But again, the salt, the pepper, and the thyme is all up to you and what you prefer. And then you want 1 teaspoon of flour per serving. So we have 4 teaspoons of flour. So I just wanted to kind of preface this and explain to you how I wrote this recipe. And I'm still trying to figure out my flow and figure out how I want to do that. My blog is still relatively new. I've got quite a few recipes on it, but I take this very seriously, especially in the age of AI with all of these fake recipes being written. I want to be very sure that what I'm giving you is not going to waste your time and it's not going to waste your recipes. And I want it to be applicable to everybody and easy to scale up or down for different family sizes. Because I know that most of my audience is not just a household of 2 like my husband and I, and I want my recipes to be versatile, and I really always want to challenge you to think about your preferences in the kitchen and don't be strict and chained to a recipe. I want you to really think about what you like and what you want to get out of something. So I say all of that. Let's go ahead and get started. I already went ahead and sliced up 3 whole onions, and you want to do it in a way that you end up with slices like this. This will give you the best bet in caramelizing your onions, and that's what we're about to do. So I'm actually just going to bring my skillet over here so that I don't have to move the camera. So we have 3 onions, which means we need 3 tablespoons of butter. So I will get this on the stove in just a moment and get this warming up. All right, we've got our butter melted, and now we are going to go ahead and add in our onions. And it may seem like a lot of onions, but let me tell you, when you are caramelizing onions, this is going to look like not a lot when we're done. And then you want to add half your salt. So we're doing 2 teaspoons of salt, which means I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of salt, and I'm just going to sprinkle that right on top here. And that's going to help draw out that liquid these caramelizing. And then we are just going to move these around in here. And I want, one more thing I'm going to point out to you before we take this over to the stove. I want you to notice that my dry cooking wine, this, I already have my 1/4 cup poured out. And that's because when you are caramelizing onions, you don't really have to like hover too much. Once you get them moving, you just set your oven to low, maybe medium low, and you just let them cook down. It takes 30 to 45 minutes. It takes quite a while. But if you find that your onions are drying out, that's going to cause them to burn. They're not going to caramelize if they dry out. I go ahead and measure out my cooking wine, and I will add a splash every now and then as needed to keep my onions from drying out. You can do this with the broth if you aren't planning on using the wine. You can also just use water. Obviously, I would like to use something that has flavor, and so I'm going to be using my cooking wine for that purpose. And if you don't feel that they're drying out and you never need to add any, that's fine. We're going to add it at a later step anyway, so don't worry about it. All right, you guys, we have got some beautiful caramelized onions here. I have been snacking on them because they are so, so tasty. And I would say that probably took about 35-40 minutes to get them to this stage. And they could keep going. We could cook them as long as we want, but I think that they are in a great place. They are fragrant, they are delicious, and they are nice and soft and are going to be perfect in our soup. Do you see what I mean? That was 3 whole onions, and this is what we're left with. So it seems like a lot at first, but it doesn't end up being a lot after they're caramelized. Next step, I've got my flour, and I just want to clarify because I'm not sure if I said tablespoons or teaspoons. We have 4 teaspoons of flour, not tablespoons. I might have said that, I don't remember. And we're going to go ahead and sprinkle that in here. And I'm just going to use a whisk to kind of go through. I did not end up needing to add anything to these onions. I didn't have to add water. I didn't have to add any of the wine. They stayed nice and wet the whole time, and that was perfect. So now I'm just going to kind of cook that flour. And if you notice, because I've made plenty of roux on this channel, and I did not add as much flour as perhaps I could have, or maybe as much as you're thinking I should have, because this is still very wet, right? However, I'm not looking to thicken this soup very much. I'm going to thicken it a little. That's what the purpose of the flour is, to thicken the soup a little bit. But when you put that soup in your bread bowl, the bread bowl is going to really help a lot. And French onion soup is like that, whether it's in a bread bowl or not, because you're adding the bread, the baguette, the crouton, whatever it is on top of it, and it's helping absorb that liquid. And I don't want this to be too thick, right? So I'm only adding a little bit of flour. I just wanted to give you that caveat in case you were thinking, oh, she needs way more flour. I'm just adding a small amount of flour. All right. Gonna let this cook here for just a minute. The next step is to go ahead and add our wine. So I've got a 1/4 cup dry cooking wine here. Again, you could use red wine, you could use beef broth if you don't want to use wine. There are other things that you could use. We're gonna go ahead and get this in here. The purpose of the wine, it helps, it's a great flavor balancer, and that's why the wine's in there. But also in this aspect, we're going to use the wine to deglaze the bottom of the pan. There isn't very much for me to deglaze because my onions stayed pretty wet the whole time. But if you had difficulty with your onions staying wet, if they were drying out a lot, then you may have some really yummy bits stuck to the bottom of your pan, and you want those. Those are flavor. So the wine helps you to deglaze the bottom of your pan. And as you can see, mine looks great. Nothing is sticking too bad. That smell, oh my gosh, the onions with the cooking wine, oh, so good. I wish you guys could smell this. So I'm just going to let this cook for a moment here. All right, now I'm going to start adding in a little bit of the broth, and I'm about to make a swap from a pan to a pot, but we'll get to that in just a second. Now, this is the homemade broth that we made together. Look at all those delicious bits of fat that are floating around in there. That's all flavor and nutrition. Absolutely delicious and amazing for this soup. So I'm just gonna slowly pour in a little bit. I'm gonna turn my heat up because I've got it on low right now. And I'm going to whisk that around because I've got the flour in here. So basically this is going to be the thick soup base that we're making in my pan right now. I'm just gonna add a little bit at a time and then whisk it in. And I'm gonna keep doing this until I have what starts to resemble a soup. The purpose of all of this is just to enhance flavor. Now, you could absolutely make this a one-pot meal, and you could have just started out in a stainless steel pot. And I have done it that way before. You could have sauteed your onions in a stainless steel pot and had this be a one-pot meal, and that would be just fine. I love using my cast iron. And if I had an all cast iron Dutch oven, a non-enameled one, a true cast iron Dutch oven, that's exactly what I would have done. But I love caramelizing onion in my cast iron skillet. I love the flavor. I love just the texture and the way that it turns out. Love it, love it, love it. And so I always start things off in my cast iron skillet and then move it to a pot if it's meant to be in a pot. It's very often how I do things. Gonna go ahead and get my pot on the stove. Got one of these little silicone spatulas, and I'm just going to pour this all right into the pot. And I'm gonna scrape every last bit of this flavor that I can out of this pan. All right, this is off, so I'm gonna turn it back on, probably medium lowish heat. And I don't really need the whisk anymore, so if I can get all these onions off of here, I'm gonna ditch the whisk. That came right back up to temperature really fast. It's bubbling. And now at this point, we can add the rest of our broth. I'm still going to just kind of slowly mix it in while it warms up. The broth is cold. It came right out of the fridge where I stored it when I strained it and put it up last night. All right, y'all, we've got all of the broth in here. This is coming back up to temperature. I'm going to put it on medium because I do want to bring it up to a boil just for a second. And we're going to go ahead and add everything else. Now, you may see a lot of different herbs in different recipes that you could add. I'm going to tell you what I like to add. But of course, do whatever it is you like to do. I'm going to add 1 bay leaf. In fact, I'm going to find a small, here's a half of one. 1/2 of a bay leaf. Because if you've been following along, we put bay leaves in our beef broth, so I don't need to overwhelm with the bay leaf, but I do really like the flavor. So I've got 1 little bay leaf in there. And then my personal favorite herb to add to French onion soup is thyme. And this is thyme that I grew in my garden last year. One of the very few herbs that I preserved, and I'm almost out of it. I love how it smells so much. I absolutely love thyme. And I'm gonna put probably 1/2 teaspoon worth into my French onion soup. And I just think it is such a complimentary herb to put in this soup. I love, 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 love the flavor. But whatever herbs you guys prefer, feel free to add. We are also going to go ahead and add our other teaspoon of salt. We added 1 teaspoon into the onions. We're gonna go ahead and add the other teaspoon now. And if that feels like a lot of salt to you, you don't have to do that much. You can use however much salt you want to use. And then we're going to do pepper. And I think I probably want to do, I'm going to do 1/4 teaspoon pepper. And that's it, you guys. That is how I season my French onion soup. Really, the onions are the star of the show. That's the flavor that I want coming out the most, and so I don't over season my soup. We are going to go ahead and bring this up to a boil. Oh my gosh. That smells so good. We're going to bring this up to a boil, and then as soon as it starts boiling, I'm going to turn it down to low, and I'm going to just let it simmer away for about 30 minutes or until the consistency that I want is reached. Right now, this is very watery, and it's going to be. That's to be expected. That's normal. It'll thicken up a little bit as it continues to simmer. And then again, I want the soup to be a little bit, just a little bit runny when I put it into my bread bowl, because the bread bowl will help absorb some of that liquid. Just a little runny. All right, you guys, let's go ahead and put this bread bowl French onion soup together. It is going to be so good. So here we have our bread bowls, and if you want to learn how to make these, I filmed the video today while I was filming the soup video, and I will have it linked down in the description. But look at how beautiful these look. They turned out so nice. Oh, they smell so good. This is going to be the best French onion soup. All right, so now what we need to do, let me get a knife. we are going to cut out the center of the bread bowl. And you can do however big a piece you want. If you want to literally cut out the whole middle, you can. If you want to cut out kind of a smaller piece, you can do that too. I usually do kind of a smaller piece because I like to actually use my spoon to scrape the bread out from the inside while I'm eating my soup. So I leave a lot of the bread in there. Kind of like I'm doing a pumpkin, like I'm carving a pumpkin. I just kind of cut out a middle piece like that. So I've got it out. And then you can decide how much of the actual bread you want to scoop out, because you can't tell really well, but there's still a lot of bread in here. So I could go in behind with a spoon and scrape out a lot of that if I wanted to. I might. I'm gonna go ahead and cut out this other piece. All right, I did end up taking a little bit more of the bread out just to make more room for the soup. Now here's what we're going to do. I've got my oven preheated to 400 already for the bread bowls. I upped it to 450, and we are going to drizzle a little bit of olive oil on the tops that we took out. And then now we are going to, or you could put your oven on broil. The broil setting makes me so nervous for some reason on my oven. I never use it. So I've just got it at 450. And we are going to put the bread bowls and the olive oil tops back in the oven and cook them for another additional like 5 minutes maybe. You really just have to keep an eye on it because you don't want anything to burn or brown too much. But the tops are going to be the crouton that we cover with cheese for the French onion soup. And then when you bake, when you scoop out the insides and put the bread bowl back in the oven, this hardens a little bit and gives you a little bit stronger of a barrier for the soup, so that these don't get soggy and the soup doesn't just leak right out. That's what I've been doing with these bread bowls, and it actually works really well. Okay, so we've got our bread bowls, and the inside is a little crispy, and then these, obviously, the tops are crispy, and they're looking great. So we can move on to the next step, which is going to be filling it with soup. Now, I'm only going to fill one of them because Tom's not home, and it's actually not dinner time yet. But, oh, and you know what? My bay leaf is in there. Look at that. Let's not get the bay leaf in the soup. Now, normally I would recommend Gruyere cheese. Gruyere is actually my favorite cheese, and I normally get it from Aldi's, but they didn't have it, so I ended up getting this Applewood smoked cheddar, which I've had before. I really like this cheese, and it'll taste great, but I would recommend a Gruyere cheese, and I already went ahead and shredded some of that up. So I'm going to put a little bit here, and then I'm going to go ahead and top mine. And I'll put a little bit more cheese on top there. And I'm actually going to take this off because I'm not quite ready to fool with that yet. So this is going to go back into the oven. I've got it on 450 for a few minutes. We have to taste test this right now. Oh my gosh, I am so excited. Oh, so good. It's gonna be really hot, so I'm gonna have to blow on it for a minute. Oh, it's still hot. Oh my gosh. That French onion soup is so rich and so flavorful. Wow. I'm like, wow. It is absolutely delicious. That is, this is absolutely amazingly delicious. Oh my gosh. This is the most hearty, flavorful, delicious, and guys, I keep saying it, so nutritious. These bread bowls are made using freshly milled flour, and then you've got that really rich, nutritious bone broth in here, the onions. Oh, it's all just so good and so good for you. What a wonderful meal to bless your loved one with. If you've hung out with me during this 3-part series, the roasted beef bone broth, the bread bowls, and now the French onion soup, I thank you. I hope that this blesses you and that you give this a shot, even if not for Valentine's Day, just as a nice dinner, perhaps a dinner for a family or friends. You could absolutely increase the recipe for the soup as well as the recipe for the bread bowls, and this could easily feed a party of people. So I hope that you will give it a shot. Check out the recipes on my blog, faithandarrowhomestead.com, and I can't wait to see you in my next video. Have faith, my friends, and keep moving forward. Bye.